Hey everyone, I am Stacey Barr and welcome to our webcast on bridging the strategy execution gap. Now, when there's a disconnect between what the organization is actually doing and what its strategic direction has planned for it to do, there's a strategy execution gap. Now, organizations that have strategy execution gaps will not achieve their strategic intent. They will not improve their performance in priority areas. They sadly can just waste time and money and energy, and they don't end up where they wanted to be. Now, the problem is the absence of a deliberate bridge between the strategic plan and its implementation. Now, research from all kinds of places, really, but like Harvard Business Review and Bridges Business Consultancy and Cotter International, that research suggests that anywhere from 60 to 80% of organizations will fail to achieve their strategic goals due to poor execution. So how do we bridge the strategy execution gap? How do we get more strategic goals achieved sooner? So that's what this webcast is about. With me and our Africa and Middle East pump partner, Peter Ndaa, we're going to look at a model of the strategic performance management process, and we're going to explore where the gap is and how we can bridge it. Now, just in case you're not familiar with either Peter or myself, let's just do a little quick introduction. So that's me. I'm Stacey Barr. Organizational performance measurement is my thing. It always has been since I started my career in the early 1990s. These days, it seems that PUMP, which is the KPI method that I created so very long ago, is more than just performance measurement. PUMP does absolutely make performance measurement itself practical and engaging and meaningful, but it also does a few powerful things in the strategy process for any organization. Specifically, it builds more clarity and results focus into the strategy design process, and it builds heaps of alignment and ownership into the strategy execution process. So you'll start noticing, if you're already a little bit familiar with PUMP, that we're kind of broadening the frame of PUMP now, acknowledging finally just how much it does serve the entire strategy process through its unique measurement foundation. That's what we're going to do in this webcast today. And my co-host is our PUMP partner for Africa and the Middle East, Peter Ndaa. Peter teaches all of our PUMP Blueprint workshops throughout Africa and Middle Eastern countries. We've been working together for, it must be about 11 years now, I think, Peter.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, hi everyone. And my name, as Stacey says, is Peter Ndaa. I help organizations design and implement strategies. And in my approach to strategy design and execution, I have integrated PUMP. And from my experience, PUMP is indeed more than just a KPI process. What I've learned is that it helps organizations in three main ways. First is to make them result-oriented or focused. That is making sure that they are clear in terms of the results they want to achieve or the change they want to achieve, and ensuring that these goals are easily understood by everyone and are measurable. It also enables organizations to use measures as feedback on the progress that they're making towards their the desired results. Helps them also to learn and continuously improve those results. And thirdly, it promotes process thinking, which helps organization appreciate that performance can only be achieved by removing constraints within and around processes. So today, Stacey and I will explore this topic of bridging the strategy execution gap. And here is how we'll do that exploring. Now, the first topic is the steps of the strategic performance management process. The second topic we'll cover is where and why the strategy execution gap happens. Our third topic is why popular strategy and performance management frameworks aren't doing, or rather aren't closing the strategy execution gap. And finally, we'll discuss how PAMP provides unique steps and techniques to bridge the strategy execution gap. What we mean by this final point is that PAMP bridges the strategy execution gap. It fills the parts of the gap the other frameworks don't fill. And it completes and integrates all those frameworks together. So we end up with a complete strategy execution flow. That's what we'll explore today. But first, let's get clear about what a strategic performance management process is.
Indeed.
Stacey.
So strategic performance management is probably just another one of those weaselly terms that we use in business. We cannot control, though, the way that terms are used. And our only option is to define them in the context that we're using them. So here is our definition of strategic performance management. It's the approaches taken to achieve desired organizational performance results, including to research, design, plan, measure, communicate, align, resource, implement, monitor, and adjust a strategy. Now, there are other definitions out there of strategic performance management that can mean quite different things. For example, there's one that even means the measurement and management of people in an HR context. But this, the strategy context, is what we mean in this webcast. Before we go any further, I just want to check, does that definition make sense to you? Read through it again if you want to, but does it make enough sense to you? And if it does, type a Y for yes in the chat. And if it's not making enough sense, type an N for no, and we might need to just clarify that a little bit more. So let's see. Lovely. So far, mostly, we've just only got yeses coming through. That's great. Thank you, everyone, for confirming that. Wonderful. Okay, only yeses. Excellent. That's good. That means we have a shared and basic understanding of what the strategic performance management process is, and we can now take a look at the process steps. Peter.
You'll probably find it easier to follow along if you have a copy of the strategic performance management process flowchart that you can zoom into. The slides might not be clear enough to follow on their own. So Stacey will share the flowchart PDF in the chat where you can download it just now.
And Deb's already got it in there for you, so you can all grab a copy.
Right. So what's useful about examining strategic performance management as a process? When we can see something as a process, we have more control over how it works and how well it does work. Setting and executing strategy is something nearly every organization does every single year, and sometimes more often, as many organizations are shifting to a more agile approach that might include a quarterly strategy focus. We spend a lot of time doing it, and so it's worthwhile to make sure it works well. And we already know that for between 60 and 80% of organizations, strategic performance management isn't quite working well. That's because there is a strategy execution gap. The strategy that is designed doesn't get implemented. That's what it simply means. Now, does your organization have a strategy execution gap? Let's ponder over this.
Yes, and let's do that with a poll. So what this poll is going to be about is how fully strategy is executed in your organization. And the idea is that you'll estimate the degree to which strategic goals are achieved and improving the performance of your organization. So achievement of strategic goals isn't the only evidence of successful strategy execution, but it's a reasonable proxy because reaching goals to improve organizational performance overall is fundamentally what successful strategy execution is about. So think about the recent history of your organization, maybe the last 2 or 3 years if you can, and reflect on how often you see the strategic goals being achieved and improving organizational performance as a whole. So here comes the poll. And I'll briefly talk you through. Let's get no idea out of the way. It's absolutely valid if you have no clue if strategic goals are being achieved in your organization or not. So don't feel bad if you need to tick that one. The next one is that most of the strategic goals are achieved in your organization and they're making organizational performance better. And then we're kind of going down from there. The next option is that many goals are achieved. Maybe not all of them are contributing to better organizational performance, and then some are achieved, then few are achieved, then virtually no strategic goals are achieved. And 7 is an option as well. You just don't have any strategic goals. So go right ahead and respond to that poll if you haven't already. I'll give you a few seconds of silence to think. Got about 2/3 of you have responded to the poll so far. So I'll give you a few more seconds just so that you don't miss out. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share the results with you. So there we have it. Thankfully, there aren't any of you who have no idea how your strategic goals are going in your organization. So that's a good thing. Peter, does anything about this stand out for you?
Yeah, I think the answer to number 3 is the most common answer I've always got from organization, that they have all these goals that they are achieving, but they can't see any improvement in the organization. I
Absolutely.
think that's a common answer here.
It's fair to say that at least half of you are finding that not many of the strategic goals are really contributing to improved overall performance. So I guess that's little wonder why you're here on a webcast about strategy execution gaps. This data suggests that many of you do have a strategy execution gap for sure. Okay. Now, even
So,
though our version of
Not going to work.
even though our version of the strategic performance management process might not be the one true answer, it's still true, like Peter said before, that examining strategic performance management as a process can help us find where our own strategy execution gap is happening and why.
right. One of the first things you'll notice is that the strategic performance process is in 3 stages. The first stage, we call it design, where the overall strategic direction is set and the organization is aligned to it. We call the second stage build, because that's where the moving parts of the strategic directions are built, like the KPIs, the dashboards, project plans, budget, and so on. Our third stage is execute, where the actions are taken to spend budgets on the right projects that will move the KPIs in the right direction to achieve the goals and ultimately achieve the strategic direction. All the steps of the strategic performance management process sit within one of these 3 stages, and they flow together in a very logical sequence over time. Right, so let's go through the steps. The design stage has 3 steps, has these steps, sorry. The first step is we do strategic analysis and set priorities. Then from there, we set strategic goals. Then for the strategic goals, we choose KPIs and targets and change initiatives. Then the rest of the organization aligns itself around the strategic direction. And then that means that they can now set their own local goals, KPIs, targets, and change initiatives. The build stage happens next with these steps. Both strategic and business units KPIs are implemented with data and graphs. The KPIs go into some kind of dashboard or report for each decision-making team. Routines to use the KPIs to monitor performance are established. And in parallel to building this monitoring system, the project management system is also built. All change initiatives have a project plan, then budgets are set for the change initiative projects, and a project management system is set up to manage them all. And then the execute stage has these steps. KPI dashboards and reports are updated each week or month. Decision-making teams review performance gaps and prioritize action to take. The actions are implemented to close the performance gaps, and then actions are evaluated to check if they worked or not, and learning is noted and captured. It is true that this process is not always this perfectly linear in every organization. There can be some iterative loops and some things done in parallel. But this is the scope of what strategic performance management involves. And we can now more easily see why strategy execution gaps happen.
Now, remember
Stacey.
that a strategy execution gap is a disconnect between what the organization is actually doing and what its strategic direction has planned on doing. In other words, the actions done and the budget spent by the organization is not achieving the strategic goals. And from our strategic performance management process that Peter just explained for us all, you might now be able to see more specifically where your strategy execution gap happens. Now, the strategy execution gap, in theory, can start as early as set strategic goals. And this happens when the strategic goals are too action-oriented or they're too vague or weasel-worded for the organization to understand. If the strategic goals are not clear and not measurable, then it creates a domino effect of misunderstanding right from the start. And it becomes the elephant in the room. Everyone knows it's there, but no one feels it's appropriate to point it out. And the strategy execution gap can extend as far as implement actions to close performance gaps. And that's because local actions that get implemented can still be the wrong ones that won't contribute to achieving strategic goals. And without accurate and clear understanding of how a business unit contributes to achieving any of the strategic goals, it's easy for them to spend time and money on the wrong improvement efforts without even realizing it. So the strategy execution gap can be caused by the way the organization does any or all of the steps between set strategic goals and implement actions to close performance gaps. You know, they could set the wrong business unit goals that don't have a cause effect link to a strategic goal. They could set KPIs that don't really evidence the goals or could drive the wrong behavior. They could create dashboards that just track activity and not results. They might choose the wrong projects that might just treat symptoms and not causes, or they might even spend the effort fixing problems that aren't strategically relevant. They could focus their budgets on just getting spent rather than getting the required results. They could misinterpret KPIs and performance data and draw the wrong conclusions, and they could ultimately just get pulled under by what's operationally urgent and not be able to prioritize time for what's strategically important. And when there is a strategy execution gap, we see that the actions that are actually being implemented aren't closing performance gaps that are what the strategy is all about. So anywhere in between those two steps of set strategic goals and implement actions to close performance gaps, the steps are either not happening at all, or they're happening, but they're not focused on the right goals and measures, or they might not be happening very well. So looking at this flowchart, have a think about where your organization's strategy gap might start. Just think of the starting point. Where do you think all the steps before it are working well, but the steps from that point forward might not be working well? So take a minute just to look at this chart and work out which step do you think your strategy execution gap begins at. And just when you're ready, type that into the chat. I'll give you about 30 seconds right now to think about that and to type which step you think it is in the chat. Starting now. And that is about 30 seconds now. So in the chat, which step do you think in this process is where your organization's strategy execution gap might start? Peter, we have Waji saying it's at set the strategic goals, just like we have there. Saleh says alignment. So probably where that fourth step, sorry, the third one in blue, but the fourth step, align the organization. Desmond says choosing KPI targets and initiatives. So that's the third step, or the second one there in blue. Hanali says establish the performance review routine. So down here in the build stage. Another one for set strategic goals. So does any of those surprise you, Peter, that they're actually quite early in this process?
Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
Change initiatives, Rachel says. So that's over here, planning the projects for change initiatives. Bosa says a combination of both setting goals and choice of KPIs and targets. Yeah, and another one for alignment. Thanks everybody for sharing those. So looking at the strategic performance management process in this way, it really can show us more clearly how strategy execution gaps happen. It's consistent also with what many researchers and strategy experts find as the main causes of strategy execution gaps.
Yeah, the most commonly cited reasons for strategy execution gaps are usually a broken down or problem with at least one of the 7 essential components of strategic performance management. Number 1 is clarity. We don't get clarity when strategic goals and objectives are vaguely articulated and too challenging for the organization to connect with. Number 2 is understanding. We don't get understanding when the strategic direction isn't well communicated to managers, supervisors, team leaders, and employees. Number 3 is leadership. We don't have strong enough leadership if leaders don't get actively involved in supporting and guiding strategy execution. Number 4 is measurement. We don't have appropriate or timely monitoring of implementation results if we just focus on activity, progress, and milestones. Number 5 is collaboration. We don't get collaboration across organizational boundaries, which is necessary when a strategy is holistic and additive. If silo thinking is allowed to continue. Number 6 is resources. We don't have enough resources and capability to execute the planned strategy if the priorities aren't made very clear and if there isn't money and time allocated to strategy execution. Number 7 is change. We cannot overcome the natural and unavoidable resistance to change if we don't have a deliberate change management approach to bring everyone or every team along the process. All these reasons are affected by how organization does its strategic performance management process. Which of these 7 reasons do you see being a problem in your organization?
So let's find that out with another poll. So this poll has each of those 7 reasons for strategy execution gaps listed in there. And you can choose as many of them as you think really apply in your organization. Which of these reasons do you think are behind your organization's strategy execution gap? So go right ahead and read through those and just tick each one that applies for you. I'll give you a few seconds of silence to do that. There's one coming out quite high that's got me intrigued, Peter, but we'll wait till everyone's had a chance to participate and then share it. Another 5 seconds or so. And I'll close the poll now and share the results with you all. Here they come. So Peter, you can see the one that got me intrigued that came out really, really high.
Yeah, there are two there, I think, popping up for me. Also three. There's the change management and collaboration, which are popping out, and also measurement of results. And it's quite normal because most, I think, approaches don't bring along people, don't promote, don't have ways to overcome resistance to change.
That's so true. And if anyone's curious, like we've been running this webcast in a few regions around the world, and we've had 2 others so far. And in both of them, the 2 that came out the highest was measurement of results and collaboration across organizational boundaries. But for you guys, change has come out much higher than it did for the other areas. And that was those 2 regions were UK and Europe, and also Australia, kind of Asia Pacific. Very interesting. Thanks everyone for participating in that. Let me take that away. Now, each organization does its strategic performance management process in different ways. They use a variety of different frameworks with the intention that their strategy will be implemented.
Yeah, we know that a strategic performance management process isn't completely bespoke for each individual organization. What I mean is that there are many other frameworks that support parts of the strategic management process that give it some structure. Let's quickly look, let's quickly sample a range of these other frameworks, and as I share them, feel welcome to add more in the chat. For strategic planning, examples are the Balanced Scorecard, OKRs, Porter's 5 forces. For performance measurement, examples are the Balanced Scorecard, Performance Prism, and PAMP. For project planning, examples are the Project Management Body of Knowledge, or PMBOK, Prince2, and Enterprise Performance Management. For performance improvement, examples are Agile, Lean, Sigma, and Scrum. For change management, examples are ADKAR, Kota's 8 Steps, and ProSci. And do we have more from all of you?
So in the chat, if there are other frameworks that you're using, please do share them, either for strategic planning, performance measurement, project planning, performance improvement, or change management. Peter, I can see Desmond said strategic planning framework that they use is Blue Ocean Strategy.
Right. Yes.
I've heard of, I know of that one. So far, no one in the other in any of our other webcasts has mentioned it though. So that's really good to see.
Yeah. It's great. So how might methods like this map into the strategic performance management process?
So yes. Oh, just a few more coming through before we move on.
Okay.
Saleh says Porter Diamond.
Oh yes, Diamond. Okay.
You're familiar with that?
Porter's
Yeah,
Diamond.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Nuruddin says Agile, of course, Agile.
Okay. Yeah.
Saleh is mentioning competitive advantage as well.
Yeah, I believe Prahalad has that approach of competitive advantages, etc. Yeah.
Okay.
And also I think Michael Porter has got that also approach.
Okay.
Right.
Hanali says growth and development strategy. And
that's very popular in the public sector. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And
it's just all about managing for results, I think, approach.
And Rinke says Agile, OKRs, Lean 6, depending on the department. So a bit of a mix there. And Jerry, hi. PACT, P-A-C-T.
Yeah, that's a polarity approach for continuity and transformation.
And I can proudly say that that has been one of my strategic planning frameworks that had a huge influence on my business. Thank you to you,
Right.
Jerry. And Saleh mentions Kaizen as well. Okay, cool.
Right.
All right, so let's continue on. Thanks everyone for sharing them. It's often useful to hear what we're all using and what's available out there. I mean, I haven't heard of every one of those, so that's been good for me too.
Yeah, so how might methods like these map into the strategic performance management process?
Indeed, a very
Stacey?
good question. So strategic planning frameworks, let's just focus on them to start with, like balanced scorecard. They map very strongly into these two steps in the strategic performance management process, strategic analysis and priorities and setting strategic goals. And that's pretty obvious, but they also have some mapping, weaker, but some mapping into the steps of choosing KPIs, aligning the organization and helping business units to set goals, etc. I've got a question for you all, and that is the strategic planning framework that your organization's using. Does it still lead you to have goals that don't seem measurable, or KPIs that are still a bit weak, or teams that don't really feel aligned to the strategic direction? So a yes in the chat if that's the case. If you're using a strategic planning framework that still has immeasurable goals, weak KPIs, or misaligned teams, type a Y or a yes in the chat, or an N or a no if that's not the case. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. I've got one yes so far. And oh, there we go. We've got a no. Another no, another yes. Okay, so a bit of a mixed bag there. Contrary to popular belief, none of the popular strategic planning frameworks have really proven to be very strong at all in the areas of setting measurable goals. Measurable goals. Setting goals, sure, but measurable goals, not so good at. Not so good at designing the most relevant and feasible KPIs, and not as good as we think at aligning the organization via cause-effect contribution. So, for example, the balanced scorecard can sometimes be described as though it is the strategic performance management process, but it doesn't directly guide every step, and nor does it provide enough detail in many of the steps, like how to write a measurable goal, how to design really the most relevant KPIs, or how to get everybody clearly aligned. But there can be no strategic performance management process without a strategic direction, and that's where frameworks like the balanced scorecard are really essential. Let's move our attention to project management frameworks. Now, project management frameworks will map strongly into these three steps in the strategic performance management process, which is plan projects for change initiatives, set change project budgets, and also create a project management or program management system. It does also They do also help with this step, implement actions to close performance gaps. It's really the doing of the project plan steps. And there are, of course, different frameworks for project management, like Peter mentioned before, PRINCE2, EPM, PMBOK, and they're vital for any strategic performance management system to work because they're the key to making the best use of resources and time to execute strategy. Now, here's another Y for yes or N for no in the chat question for you. So get your finger poised over the Y or the N on your keyboard. Does your organization have a project planning framework that's used to support strategy execution? Y for yes, N for no. Does your organization have a project planning framework that's used to support strategy execution? This is looking pretty good, Peter. We've got quite a few yeses so far.
Yeah, it's very good.
I'll just give a few more seconds for anyone
That's
who's
very
not...
encouraging.
Wow, that is encouraging, yeah. Great. Oh, Ringo says only in the sales department. Okay,
Right.
it's a start. Great. Excellent. All right, so let's move on from project management frameworks to performance improvement frameworks. So performance improvement frameworks map very strongly, obviously, into that one step to implement actions to close performance gaps, because that is what improvement's all about. They also influence other steps in this process, like planning projects for change initiatives, prioritizing performance gaps and deciding on actions, and also evaluating and learning. So there are different frameworks for performance improvement, like Agile, Lean, Six Sigma, Kaizen, theory of constraints, others that some of you mentioned before. And of course, no strategic performance management system is going to be complete without one, because a random approach to improve performance rarely improves performance. So another Y for yes or N for no in the chat. Does your organization have a performance improvement framework that supports strategy execution? Have you got a performance improvement framework that supports strategy execution? So again, quite a few Ys for yes. Also encouraging. So we have an audience, Peter, that's really strong in project management and performance improvement frameworks, which is great. Okay, still only yeses coming through. Okay, so we know that's a strength for all of you. Let's move on from performance improvement frameworks and now talk about change management frameworks. This will be interesting, Peter, based on the results from that last survey about, about the reasons why there are strategy execution gaps. I'll be interested if there's a correlation now. Yeah. So change management frameworks map strongly into a couple of the steps in strategic performance management. Plan projects for change initiatives and evaluate and learn. And you can see I've gone a click too far, but those other green steps are where change management frameworks can also support what's going on there, like setting strategic goals, choosing initiatives, aligning the organization, and so on. Of course, again, there are different frameworks for change management. We know of ProSci, ADKAR, Kotter's theory for change, Lewin's model of change. There are others. And strategic performance management requires change. Fundamentally, it requires change, but it's something that humans are naturally find a struggle or will resist. So it's not going to happen, though, without deliberate attention. So another Y for yes or N for no in the chat. Does your organization have a change management framework that's used to support strategy execution? And Peter, here's the correlation coming through. Can you see that all ends? And for no. And that's what I was meaning about if you remember the poll we did before, I'll just share the results again. Change management to overcome resistance was the biggest problem. So it makes plenty of sense. All these no's make plenty of sense. Okay, so when we integrate our strategic planning, project management, performance improvement, and change management frameworks all together into the strategic performance management process, what does it look like? So I'm just going to focus on where each of those frameworks maps strongly into this process. This is what we get. Strategic planning frameworks contribute mostly here. Project management frameworks contribute mostly there. Performance improvement frameworks contribute strongly in this additional step, but also in a couple of the others that we saw before. And change management frameworks add that last step. But as you can see, we still have a lot of steps that common frameworks don't strongly map into, that aren't strongly supporting. And this is a major reason why we have a strategy execution gap. You might just look over some of those white steps that are left behind, the gaps, and notice that a lot of them are related to performance measurement. Choosing KPIs, business units setting KPIs, implementing the KPIs, creating dashboards, establishing performance review routines, updating our dashboards, and prioritizing performance gaps. A lot of those relate to measurement. These gaps are why we really need to integrate one more deliberate framework if we're going to close our strategy execution gap.
And that additional framework we need to fill those gaps is a true performance measurement methodology like PAMP. PAMP stands for performance measurement process, and the U is up to you. There is a story behind that, and I think once you attend one of our programs, you learn about why the U. To help you follow along, you can download a PDF called Pump Blueprint from the chart, which is a copy of what you see on the slide here.
So Deb's got that in the chat now, ready for you all to download.
Right. So, PUMP is a process, and it's a process that works across the whole organization to connect everyone who everyone into executing and executing the strategy in the most meaningful and practical way possible. Step 1 of PUMP, understanding measurement purpose, fixes the focus firmly on continuous performance improvement as the purpose of measurement and, of course, the purpose of strategy. Step 2, mapping measurable results, translates all the strategic and business unit goals into clear, focused, and measurable performance results. This means they are understood by everyone and can be aligned in a cause-effect and systematic way, so everyone knows what they are responsible for in contributing to the achievement of the strategic direction. Step 3, designing meaningful measures, chooses the most feasible and relevant measures that evidence each strategic or business goal. It builds very strong ownership and even excitement for the measures that will drive strategy direction. Of strategy execution, sorry. Step 4, building buy-in to measures. It gets ownership from all stakeholders in a strategy quickly, easily, and engagingly. And it warms up them up to see which part of its execution they own. Step 5, implementing measures, documents in detail the data, analysis, and reporting requirements for each of the measures that will monitor strategic or business goals. This step delivers the evidence to monitor the results that strategy execution should be delivering. Step 6, interpreting signals from measures, focuses attention on the gaps between as is and to be performance. These performance gaps are the very things that strategic initiatives are designed to close. And this step is the way to monitor if strategic execution is indeed closing those performance gaps. Reporting performance measures creates, which is step 7, creates useful and usable performance reports and dashboards that inspire everyone to action. And this action will be to continue executing the planned strategy or tweaking it, so it does a better job of closing the performance gaps. Step 8, reaching performance targets, improves business processes to move as is performance towards to be. It's the actual doing of strategy execution where changes are made to the business systems to lock in improvement performance and achieve the strategic goals. Each one of PUMP's steps either supports, integrates, or complements what the rest of our strategy management approaches do. PUMP supports, integrates, and completes approaches like balanced scorecard, OKR, Agile, Prince2, ProSci to close the strategy execution gap. But it also fills in the gaps that these other approaches left, like we saw before. So let's integrate PUMP. Sorry.
No, you're
Stacey.
right, Pete.
No. Let's integrate PUMP into the strategic performance process and see how it does this, Stacey.
Okay, so there's our strategic performance management process, and PUMP maps strongly into more than half of the steps in the strategic performance management process. It also supports many of the remaining steps as well. Now, obviously, pump will be the driving force for the measurement aspects of strategic performance management. But pump is not just about measurement, as it turns out, which is why it maps into so many of the other steps of this process. That's because pump's about collaboration. It's about collaboration to own and define and monitor and improve the results that matter most. So our final, I think it's the final Y for yes and for no response in the chat. Does your organization have a measurement framework, a deliberate measurement framework that's used as part of strategy execution? Now, you'll know you have one if you can give it a name, if you can call it something. So does your organization have a measurement framework that's used as part of strategy execution? Saleh's got a yes, but so far everyone else is a no. So Kaplan and Norton's approach, a balanced scorecard, is partly a measurement approach, but it still doesn't do a lot of the things that a deliberate measurement approach will do. It doesn't go into the detail of it. Mostly no's coming through, Peter. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for sharing that. So let's now look at what happens to the strategic performance management process when we combine pump with all the other frameworks that we've explored. So this was our strategic performance management process without pump. We saw that just before. What's interesting is what happens when we overlay pump. And there we have it. It fills in all the gaps and it bolsters some of the other frameworks where they can often miss the mark. It turns out that pump is a practical and powerful way to bridge the strategy execution gap. So if you have a reaction to this or a question, anything that you want to say in response to what Peter and I have shared with you so far, please go ahead and type in the chat. Do you have a question? Do you have a new idea or a thought or something that you've got front of mind? Is this making sense to you? Do you feel like something's missing? Just let us know what you think. Take a few moments to ponder that and just type something into the chat for us. Peter, you've been using pump for strategy execution for a long time now, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And indeed, it really helps organization just address some of the challenges that they face when designing and especially when you're actually implementing strategy. Yeah, so those, I mean, it's an amazing tool for those who have experienced it. And I think a lot of my clients always tell me, wow, we should have done this much earlier.
Yeah, indeed. No comments are coming through just now. Oh, there we go. We've got a couple. Elizabeth says most organizations do the strategic planning with members of the management and senior team only. What's your take on involving the whole organization in planning? I've got a response to that, Peter, but I might invite you to go first if you wish.
No, I think just go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's important that we're all that everyone's involved in planning. It is the senior management's team's responsibility to lead and set the overarching strategic direction for sure. But they also need to be fairly present and active, I believe, in how that strategic direction is cascaded, for want of a better word, but cascaded down into teams. They need to support that process, but each team needs the opportunity and the tools as well to be able to think through the way that they set goals that have a cause effect contribution to the strategy. Peter, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think for what I've observed in a lot of organizations, once the leadership has set up those who use pump or integrate pump into their process, once they have set up the strategic direction, pump allows them to bring in all the stakeholders, the rest of the people, to give feedback, and that is usually very powerful, and people feel involved in the process. So I think it's how the methodology is or how, it depends on the approach the organization is using, but people need to feel part of the process of designing strategy, though the leadership has to provide the strategic direction. And that's what I think this methodology helps bridge.
Absolutely. Saleh says, I really admire the methodology, and is also going to be joining you, Peter, in Dubai next week for the pump training.
Yes, yes. Look forward to meeting you, Saleh, next week.
Hanali's been a huge fan of pump for years, and it's on the radar to enroll, which is great. Rinka says, we do agile planning every quarter, but partial management team only. Well, that's interesting. And Bosa said, I recently used Pump's 31 criteria to assess performance measurement, scorecard maturity in my organization. I liked the tool, hence I want to know more about the tool. That's great, Bosa. So glad you've played around with that. Excellent. Okay. Now, because most organizations don't take a very deliberate approach or a framework for performance measurement like Pump, it's reasonable to expect that they're going to still continue to have a strategy execution gap. But often just starting with Pump, because of how thorough it is, it's enough to get a decent bridge across that strategy execution gap. Peter, let's do a bit of a summary.
Pump is the bridge to close the strategy execution gap because it completes and integrates all the frameworks needed for a successful strategic performance management process. That's because it adds unique things missing from the other frameworks. For instance, it insists on result-oriented and measurable goals. So it clarifies the strategy and makes it easier to communicate and understand. It builds cause-effect maps that identify and align the unique contribution every team and every organizational unit to the strategic goals. It has more how-to detail and guidance than other frameworks. So it makes each step in the process very practical for everyone. It's team-based and inclusive. So it gets the whole organization working collaboratively to own and implement strategy. It keeps everyone focused on priorities rather than activity. It inspires everyone to continuously close the performance gaps via learning. For all these reasons, PAMP helps integrate the other frameworks into the strategic performance management process so that the process is complete. PAMP itself is also a process. That's what we must remember, right? And therefore, we have to integrate it with other processes, but it cannot work on its own. It needs to be integrated. And if you are considering the choice to start with PAMP, our next PAMP workshop could be the time to start this. In our PAMP Blueprint training programs, you will systematically learn each step of PAMP. You will learn, practice, and apply each new technique of PAMP. You will see how the PAMP templates and tools, these are really like conversational guides. Make it practical and collaborative for you and the people you work with. You will have real examples to follow of how others have done it. We may even spend time workshopping live examples from the participants. There's also a generic case study that we use for you to practice on fast without getting distracted by your own goals. But we also give you plenty of time and coaching to help you apply what you learn so that you can start measuring your own real life goals. When you go back to work after the program, you'll know what to do and how to do it. And with a free silver membership in our PAMP community that comes after you join the program, you can find more support in a large collection of case studies from your peers, deeper dives into the PAMP steps, even more how-to tips, and of course, our exclusive webcasts. You can learn the entire PAMP Blueprint live and interactive in a choice of this way. One, at one of our live public training workshops serving Africa and the Middle East by hosting your own private in-house workshop exclusive for you and your colleagues, or contacting me if you'd like more information about how we can help you with better performance measurement and evidence-based leadership. We have an upcoming PAMP program for the Middle East and Africa in November, from November 13th to 15th in Johannesburg, South Africa. And you could book your spot now. And here is some of the feedbacks we have got from some participants to our workshops. Brian Gachisho, the strategy manager at Telecom Kenya, says, learning the PAMP process has greatly enhanced my approach to strategy, where I now apply critical skills in creating alignment between purpose, strategy, and operations, and building stakeholder buy-in and execution excellency. And Alex Okware from the Office of the Auditor General Uganda says the training was practical with insights of really issues affecting our organization in regards to strategic management. So before we wrap up, are there any unanswered questions you still have about PAMP?
Yeah, so if you do have any questions you want to ask right now, Peter and I are going to stay here and answer all of them, we hope. So go right ahead and type them into the chat now if you do have a question you'd like us to answer for you. A few were submitted in advance, Peter, so we might start with those to give everyone a chance to add their questions to the chat in the meantime. So Dorothy asks, what is a good way to help one focus on the big rocks in the middle of the humdrum of daily execution? Is there a good tool to use? Our wording is fantastic. Is there a good tool to use? How can an organization keep their strategy agile? So yeah, Peter, do you have some thoughts about that? It's that age-old question of
I might be biased, but I think we just answered this question in this webcast. I think PAMP is really what will help you focus on what's really important and what improving, because it helps you prioritize the results that you need to monitor and achieve. And of course, because PAMP forces you to look at constraints within and around your organization, it definitely forces you to be very agile, because when you monitor and evaluate performance, you look at the constraints within the organization and outside the organization or around its environment, and you take the necessary action to close the performance gap. So I feel like PAMP answers Dorothy pretty well.
Absolutely, and I'll give you a bit of a preview actually, because I've just finished writing my article for the September issue of my newsletter, and it's about the topic of how to respond to the objections people have or the resistance they have to measurement. And one of them is, I've got real work to do. There's too much else going on for me to think about measuring improvement, measuring strategy. And one of the tips that I give there is that you can start a team with one of their operational problems, like maybe there's a lot of rework that's wasting their time. Maybe the reason why there's so much daily humdrum is that they're doing things that don't need to be done or are taking too long. And PAMP, just like Peter said, PAMP can be used to help them focus on that and get some improvements in that, so that they can actually create more time. There's less humdrum. Let's see. Elizabeth has asked, how do you balance the employee level of engagement during strategic planning? That's a really good question, because lack of engagement is one of the big reasons why strategy doesn't get executed.
Yeah, and I think again that was addressed. One of the features of PAMP is that it's collaborative. working with small teams and then involving um, the rest of the stakeholders. And I think that helps people get engaged in the planning process and in the strategy. That has been my experience facilitating, implementation of pumps in organization. Yeah, but I don't know what Stacey can say about it, but I feel pump answers again this very well because of the way it's designed. It's a
Yeah,
collaborative tool. Yeah.
that's exactly it. And what Pump does insist is that every team who owns a set of measures, they're the people that design that set of measures. Otherwise, they won't be able to own them. So at any level in an organization, the Pump tools can be used to help each team really create the measures that they know are going to matter and contribute to the strategic direction, rather than have the measures handed down to them, which doesn't create ownership. Desmond has a question here in the chat. How do you effectively get a team that is accustomed to brainstorming goals and KPIs to use such a disciplined process as Pump? Peter, I'd like to go first on this one.
Yeah, sure.
In responding to Desmond. Don't try to use all of Pump at once. If they are so used to brainstorming, and I've never actually tried this, to be honest, so you might want to experiment with it, but beware, because I don't know how well it will work. But my first response would be, if they're used to brainstorming, let them brainstorm goals, but guide the brainstorming with very specific questions. So you could say, let's brainstorm what are the results that really matter to us. And then when they write a result-oriented goal, but it's full of weasel words, brainstorm, what are the meanings of these weasel words, until you get a goal that's clear and measurable. And then as far as developing KPIs, it's the same kind of thing. Let's brainstorm, what is the evidence we would see around us if this goal was happening? And then you could brainstorm, what are the different ways we could quantify this evidence to turn it into a potential measure? So even though brainstorming is not the best approach to that, it needs to be a little bit more deliberate. At least it's a warm up to the idea of having very guided and specific brainstorming. And those questions that I gave you to guide brainstorming are questions plucked straight out of the Pump templates. So that might be a way to start. Peter, is that too wacky an idea?
No, I think you just answered it. I was used to brainstorming until I came across Pump, and as you said, brainstorming kind of in Pump is very guided. The questions are very clear and very focused towards what towards what kind of outputs you should have. So yes, brainstorming is a good thing, but Pump puts structure into it and becomes more meaningful. Rather than just having open-ended brainstorming, etc. Pumps focuses focuses that conversation to a specific result or output that you should have. That's been my experience. So
Yeah.
we can do away with brainstorming, but we can improve it using the tools in Pump.
Yeah, at least to warm people up. And when they see that it's working, then you can say, well, did you know this is actually a tool, and we can make it work even better by following the process.
Yes.
Yeah. Bosa says, while Pump provides a valuable framework for assessing performance measurement, real value lies in the actual employment of such results to drive tangible change and improvement. Yes. How can one ensure that a Pump assessment leads to practical and actionable improvements in our performance management system? Now, when you say Pump assessment, Bosa, I'm thinking it might be that maturity tool that you were using. Everyone, we'll put a link to the tool that Bosa was talking about before, I think. We'll put a link to it anyway in the follow-up email that we'll send out to you all when the replay is ready. And that's a free tool. It's available on my website. You can use it and play with it. But what that tool is doing is helping you evaluate, where is your current approach to performance measurement strong or not strong enough? And the idea is that the output of that is you realize where you need to make your current approach to measurement stronger. And that gives you clues about which parts of Pump are going to be most valuable for you, because Pump is the solution to that. It fixes those problems. So one way to segue from the results of the assessment into a decision to try pump is to say, well, what are the consequences of us doing nothing? We're just going to continue to waste money and time collecting data we don't need. We're going to continue having performance review conversations that go around in circles and don't lead to any kind of closing of performance gaps or achievement of targets. Are we willing to live with those consequences? And generally, when you word it like that, no, you obviously can't. So then the next part of the segue into trying pump is to say, could we just pick one part of our business, one team, one business unit, one strategic goal, and apply pump just to that as a bit of an experiment to see how it works, to feel it, to get evidence that it actually will work for us, and then make the decision about committing to using it to really improve your overall performance management system. I hope that helps both. So Peter, is there anything you want to add to that, or take a different angle to it?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more questions coming through the chat right now. So hopefully that means that you've got all you need now from this webcast, and we might start wrapping up. Now, I personally really hope that you take pump training and do it with Peter, and then therefore join our pump community, which is free for everybody who has been through pump training. Peter, as always, thank you so much for sharing your experience and insights with us.
Thank you too. Thank you all for joining us on this webcast. Remember, if you're looking at closing the strategy execution gap and begin to manage for results, then pump is what you need.
Absolutely. So we will be sharing the replay with you in the next day or two when it's ready, so you can watch it again, share it with your colleagues, and get a little bit more engagement, we hope, in closing your strategy execution gap with pump. Thanks, everyone. It's been great having you join us today. Catch you next time.